So just real quick before Ignaz goes. So when I say consistent, it in the vetting process, first of all, should not be a super long process. Like it shouldn't take you 9 years to figure it out. But once you get married, as you change, your partner changes. And as you move in this direction and you guys are going the same direction, you're changing in the same direction. So you're both growing, both changing, but you're both changing at the same way, going the same direction. So that bond actually gets tighter. It's when you decide that you're going to go a completely different direction, in which hopefully you find that out during the vetting phase. But typically, you in my opinion, you have to pull off of that best version of that person, because that's who shows up the first time you meet them. Is the best version. The vetting process should be able to unmask that best version, and then you can actually see who they really are. You get to see their consistency of who they are. And then once you tie the knot, then you start to change at the same rate. Because as you changed, your husband changed. As you went through your experiences, your husband went through those experiences with you. And you both, and I can guarantee it, and you can call me a liar, but I don't think you will, you grew closer through those experiences.
I can say that, but where I would have to disagree with you is that what really happens a lot of times is not that you always are growing together. Sometimes one person is growing and the other one is still in the same place. Sometimes you grow together, or sometimes you've taken a different direction and the other person is still here. So it looks like we're growing apart. Like when people say, oh, well, we just fell out of love. I don't really think it's about the falling out of love part. I think it has a lot to do with not knowing how to adjust and adapt to the changes. So there were times where my husband had made some changes that I wasn't necessarily on board with or agree with. Like if it's like dietary changes or something like that, and I'm used to, eating red meat, and now all of a sudden he doesn't want to eat red meat, he doesn't want to eat chicken, and that, and I know that's just a little
Yeah,
example. What I'm saying is, if for me I'm not ready to get on board with that, that's going to be a challenge for
that
us because we're not moving in that same direction.
and last point I make, then that's where you have to have the conversations and communication to make sure you stay on the same page. Because you could feel like, and it could just be one way, like it could just be you feeling that way. But if you don't express that, then the other person doesn't even know that you feel that way. So they think that you guys are going in the same direction. But once you communicate it out and you actually have that conversation and you guys get right back on track, because you have built a bond of trust and communication, you're back on track. Y'all are gonna keep moving in the same direction. It's when something is broken in the relationship, is when two people start moving in different directions, because something is not happening, whether it be the communication piece or how you feel or what he's thinking and how he's processing. The communication must happen in order for that relationship to remain healthy. And I think that we oftentimes get too self-absorbed and wrapped up in ourselves that we forget that there's somebody else on this journey with us. And we have to be able to have that conversation. And I'll end it there because I know Nas wanted to jump in here also, and I'm monopolizing. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Um, so I think two people can head in the same direction and still not have the same growth rate, right? And one healthy example of that, because sometimes we jump to the unhealthy, is that going into the relationship, if somebody had more growth to do than the other person, you can still head towards the same goals, but that person had to take leaps and bounds to catch up to you. So they were growing at a faster rate where you've been growing consistently. So I think that there being on the same page, taking the same path, and your growth path are not mutually exclusive. They're not dependent on each other. You can grow at different rates and still head in the same direction, be on the same page. But to what you said, AP, communication is what's required to make sure that you're not heading into different directions as you're growing, right? But to Mistaken's initial question about change, your character doesn't ever change. Like, the fabric of who you are doesn't change. Circumstances change, the way you might deal with certain things might change. And so those are the things that really require vetting, instead of just like the attributes of like kindness or niceness or like generosity. Those will change with circumstances, but the makeup of that person doesn't actually ever really change. Barring like a really traumatic, life altering event, people don't really change that drastically. And so I think that's the thing that women look for in men and men look for in women, is like, who are you really? And is that, am I attracted to that person without all the bells and whistles and everything else that you want to show me that's shiny and nice and new? When you strip that back, like the core of who you are, can I really rock with that forever?
Yeah, nah, I 100% agree. So when I be talking about the relationship dynamic, I think this boils down to like a I know it's a taboo word, but the submission or the power dynamic within a relationship. Because if you are in like the, when you were talking about the chicken and the, and well, just wanting to go in a different route than your husband, typically that ensues a power struggle because you feel your way is right and you would want to go in this direction. I'm not for you specifically, right? I'm taking this off of you. I was just using the power struggle as, so when people get into that power struggle, I think that's when divorces happen. Because if one person refuses to yield, you'll both be on the opposite end of the spectrum yelling my way is right. So a lot of times when I talk about relationships, I think they define by a fork in the road. So you need to be in the car with me to turn left or right at that fork in the road, because that's when we'll split. So you don't have to be as fast, or I could be slower or whatever, but we have to be going in the same direction, like what AP said. It should mesh us closer when we become one. If we're operating like, hey, this is what's best for you, it's not what's best for me, and I'm not even trying to figure out how to get on that same page, that usually ends in a divorce or a separation or a breakup. Most of the time when you see people who stuck it out, they figured out how to get past that power dynamic. But if that's going to be a reoccurring thing, then it'll constantly come up until you find the right subject for that to be the thing you break up about. Not you though. I'm not saying you. I'm saying in general with the power dynamic.